Colossians chapter 3 is where we are today. I don't know where you grew up. Estevan, Saskatchewan would be a great place to grow up, but the best place to grow up, if you ask Grace or myself, is a place called Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. I loved Moose Jaw when I was growing up, and there are lots of things I would brag about if I were to take you back to Moose Jaw. I'd show you a whole bunch of things. I'd take you to Crescent Park. I'd take you to Wakamo. I would take you to the air base and show you the snowbirds. I'd take you out to the Western Development Museum and show you that beautiful museum. I've been through there hundreds of times, and I still think it's amazing. I'd take you down to where the Wild Animal Park used to be. I'd take you all over Moose Jaw and show you a whole bunch of things, as Grace would if she were to do that as well. Moose Jaw has a lot of cool stuff. One of the things that Moose Jaw has that a lot of people wouldn't think about, but I think is really neat, is something called the Thunderbird Viaduct. Well, nobody in Moose Jaw calls it the Thunderbird Viaduct. They actually call it the 4th Avenue Bridge. The 4th Avenue Bridge is a bridge that is on 4th Avenue, surprisingly enough. It is a bridge that connects the north side of the city to the south side of the city. And when I was a little kid, I thought it was the tallest structure I'd ever been on. If you're in the middle of the 4th Avenue Bridge and you look over, it is a long way down to the railway tracks and to the railway yards that you are crossing over. It goes over the Thunder Creek that goes under there as well. But not only is it tall, I think it's beautiful. It's laid out with all these little columny things on the top of it. It used to have a steel structure over the top of it as well. And I just always thought it was cool. It had these murals on the side of it and just a really beautiful thing. When I was a kid too, we'd often go over to one of my uncle's place. Both my uncles lived on South Hill. When we would come back about this time of year, going across the 4th Avenue Bridge, it was often foggy and really spooky looking, and I always thought that was cool too. 4th Avenue Bridge was an important part of my life. Everywhere we went, we kind of crossed the 4th Avenue Bridge. It got us to the other side of things where we needed to be. If you're ever in Moose Jaw, pay attention. It's a beautiful bridge. What we have as we start Colossians chapter 3 is an equally beautiful bridge, something that connects the first part of the book of Colossians to the second part. And we will miss something really wonderful if we miss these 3 or 4 verses right here. In the first part of the book, Paul has spent 2 whole chapters talking about Jesus, trying to convince his readers that all you need is Jesus. You don't have to be good enough to be a Christian. You don't have to be smart enough, kind enough. You don't have to do a whole bunch of deeds, take a big journey. All you've got to do is accept the gift that Jesus is giving you. That's the entire message of the first part of the book. In the second part of the book, chapters 3 and 4, he spends the rest of the time talking about our response. So because you've been given this great gift of Jesus, you're going to live in certain ways. And again, that order is really important. We don't do good things so that God loves us. We do good things because God loves us. That's the message, and that's the reminder all the way through. But there's a bridge section here. There's a bridge section here that if we don't get this bridge, we will never get from the offer of Jesus to changing our lives. We will never get from the promise of hope to the hope being lived out. We've got to have this bridge part if we're going to understand it together. And so this morning we're going to look at the first few verses of Colossians chapter 3. We're going to look at this bridge, and I'm going to suggest to you that there is one shift in thinking that makes this work. One thing we must do if we're going to connect these 2 sides of the gospel message. Colossians chapter 3 verse 1 says this: "Since then you've been raised with Christ." So he's connecting it to the first part. I've been telling you about Jesus the whole time. Since then, because of your death in the waters of baptism, you've been raised with Christ. Here's the bridge bit. "Since then you've been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. Short little 4 verses there, but really important. In fact, there are really only 2 phrases that make up the really important part of this, and there are 2 phrases I want you to think about today. You're going to hear them over and over, and I hope you hear them so much that they ring in your head all week long. Paul says, I want you to set your hearts on things above. And I want you to set your mind on things above. This is the most significant shift in the entire book. Even with everything else he says, stop doing these things, start doing these things, all these other things that we're told to do. This is the most important shift that we get to make. Make a choice. Set your minds and set your hearts on things above, not on earthly things. If we get this one part, then we get everything else. Everything else falls into place. It is that important. But it is also that big a challenge. It is a real challenge for us to make this shift. And sometimes because we're so focused on what we should be doing, we're trying to teach this, we teach it incorrectly. And we hear it incorrectly. So when I say set your minds and hearts on things above, not on earthly things, somebody here is saying, yeah, come on now. You can't live that way. I've got to think about earthly things. Or maybe you know somebody who, as the old preacher phrase used to be, is so heavenly minded they're no earthly good, right? They're just stupid because they're never thinking practically. They're only thinking about spiritual things, not about paying their bills or whatever. I don't know. But I think over the years we've misunderstood this. What Paul is saying is not one or the other. What Paul is arguing about is an order. You are going to think about earthly things. We always do. We always will. But Paul is saying, can you get your minds on heavenly things first? Can you set your hearts and minds on things above before you start thinking about all those earthly things? That is the challenge. That is the struggle. And here's why it matters. We've got to get that order right so that we see properly. If we get that order backwards, we see incorrectly. So I can go without my glasses. I play hockey without my glasses all the time. I can take my glasses off and I can kind of see the back row back there. I can see you're there. I don't have a lot of definition, but I can see Bev back there. But if I put my glasses on, now I can see her, right? This is what Paul's asking us to do. Get things in the right order. Put on the thing that helps you see properly. Here's the deal. If you think earthly things first, if your major concern is what I have and what I do and where I go and what I can store up for myself, if that is your major concern, you will not see heavenly things well. It'll be like taking your glasses off. It'll be sort of there, but it's blurry. What Paul is arguing for is, rather than that, I want you to put heavenly things first. I want you to think in heavenly terms. I want you to filter everything through what would God want me to do here. And when I put my heavenly concerns first, then all the spiritual things come into focus. It's like putting your glasses on so that the things you're thinking about all the time, you actually see them even better if you start here instead of here. And Paul's going to urge them, you must think with heavenly things first. You must get your spiritual minds going before your physical ones so that you can see the physical things well. Or to change the analogy a little bit, ever since I was born, I've seen the moon, right? The moon's always been up there. I remember lots of times about this time of year, my brother and I'd be out tobogganing at night, and the moon's really big. And every once in a while, I looked at the moon and thought, the moon looks kind of cool tonight, right? Kind of a funny color, or it looks bigger, or really bright. And once in a while, in my 57 years of life, I've noticed the moon a little bit. One time, though, A few years ago, we were at Sarah's aunt's cabin in Montana. She had a cabin on a mountain in Montana, and in that cabin, she had this huge telescope. And I took that telescope out one night, and I sat it on her deck, and I aimed it at the moon, and I saw this. And I spent the rest of the night out on her deck looking at the moon, because I saw the moon in a way I'd never seen it before. The moon had always been there, I just hadn't seen it well. What Paul is going to ask us to do is to get your telescope out. What Paul's going to say is you need to get your heart in the right place. And when that happens, you don't neglect all your spiritual, all your earthly stuff. It actually helps you see it better. Paul says, I want you to set your hearts on things above. I want you to set your mind on things above, not just on earthly things, because that will change how you see everything. It'll help you see things well. It'll help you see things you've never seen before. So for those of you who will be here for the next few weeks, over the next few weeks, we're going to go through a whole section where he helps us to use our spiritual vision to see things better. But let me give you a partial list today of how setting our minds and our hearts on things above helps us. What it actually does, how it clarifies our vision, what it actually would do for us if we could make that shift. If we thought spiritually first, how would it change everything else? It changes lots of different things. In fact, number one, I think one of the things it'll do is it would change how you saw one another. It would change how you saw the people around you. When we judge people only from an earthly perspective, we judge them on, again, what they have and what they do and what degree do you have and what job do you do. And right, we judge people based on sort of where they are, or if they're successful, or if they're not. But if we can get our minds and hearts in a spiritual place to begin with, then we see people differently. We don't see them for who they are, we see them for who they could be. We don't see them for where they are, we see them for what they could become. We don't see them for what they've done, we see them for what God could do with them. It changes our vision. In fact, we skipped over a little section. You might realize that at the end of chapter 2, we skipped over a little section there that we had been preaching through, and we just kind of jumped that. If you want to go back and look at the end of chapter 2, Paul has one complaint with the teachers, the false teachers around the church in Colossae, and you know what his complaint is? It says they're judging each other. It says one of your biggest problems is that you're judging each other. You're judging each other based on days and what you eat and what I like this and I don't like that, and I think I'm better than you because I don't do this and you do that. He says, you know why you're judging one another? Because you're not connected to the head. You're not connected to Christ. He says if you were really connected to Christ, you wouldn't judge each other. You would see each other differently. Even if you were wrong, even if your brother was wrong, you wouldn't be criticizing him, you'd be trying to help him if you saw him spiritually. Judging one another is a sign, arguing is a sign that you're not living spiritually, not seeing things well. Set your hearts and minds on things above so that you see each other correctly. See what each other could become. I think as well, if we set our hearts and minds on things above, it causes us to see our blessings. And see the things that we've been given, to see what we've got correctly. We sang the song, Count Your Blessings. Those who watching the video didn't hear that, but we just sang the song, Count Your Blessings. And that mindset is the mindset, isn't it? That if we see our lives through spiritual eyes, we understand that the things I have not earned them. I have not got them because I'm so smart. I have not created my own life. I've been given it. When we see things spiritually, we understand the things around us are just gifts. Things we've been given. Things we've been blessed with. And so I can look around and be thankful for what I have because it's been given to me as a gift. It changes how I see what I have. It makes me see my blessings instead of what I don't have right now. When I start seeing my blessings and seeing things properly, then I also start seeing my time and my possessions properly, and I become generous. Right? If I see incorrectly, if I see things as the world sees and say, I earned all this. I earned this house and that truck and that car and this trip and these things and this pile of money. I earned it, and it's mine. That's one way to think about it. But if we see things with our minds and hearts set above, if we see them through a spiritual mindset and say, no, all this stuff has been given to me as a blessing, then what do? Jesus said, generous, freely you've received, freely give. That's a different mindset. Not that I've earned it and I get to keep it, but I've been given it and I can share. Right? This is the shift of thinking that Paul wants them to go through. He wants them to start seeing things not just from an earthly point of view, but from a heavenly one. Set your hearts and minds on things above. It changes how we see things. I think it changes how we see opportunities around us. I think if we're walking around with a spiritual mindset, again, we see people differently, we see situations differently, we see opportunities to step in and say something good about God. We see opportunities for us to become helpful, useful in God's hands. We see opportunities for us to do something instead of stay back. Right? And again, I know some really cool stories about you guys. I know some really interesting stories, not because you bragged about them, but because others have told me. So-and-so stepped in and helped me when I needed help, and I remember that. Right? When we see things properly, we see opportunities to help and do good and be kind. And every once in a while, somebody comes to me and says, I really want an opportunity to do something for God, but I just don't know where to start. And I think, why? Why wouldn't you know where to start? There's all kinds of opportunities. Open your eyes. See things properly. There's all kinds of people who need encouragement. There's all kinds of people who need love. There's all kinds of people who could use a friend. There's all kinds of people who could use you. When we start seeing things properly, there's all sorts of opportunity. More than we could even handle, maybe. I would suggest to you that when we see things properly, when we get a heavenly mindset, we even see our struggles differently. This is what the Apostle Paul says in the book of Romans. Just hold your place in Colossians and flip over to Romans chapter 5 for a second. The Apostle Paul's talking about his life, and he's talking about the things he's been through and how God has led him here or there and all these sorts of things. And Paul's life wasn't easy. Jesus' life wasn't easy. There were lots of struggles, lots of hardships, lots of things. But listen to what Paul says about it. He says in chapter 5, verse 1, therefore, since we've been justified through faith, since we are a people of faith, since we think like God's people, since our minds are set on things above, and that's the glasses through which we see everything else, he says we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we've gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. He says, my whole life is different now. I boast that I walk with God every single day. That's a wonderful thing. And everything is better because of it. But, listen to what else he says. Not only do I rejoice in that, though, but I also glory in my suffering. He says, because of the new way I think, even my sufferings aren't the worst thing. He says, I also glory in my suffering because I know that suffering produces perseverance. And perseverance produces character. And character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit whom He's given us. He says, even my struggles have been used for my good if I think about them the right way. Again, an earthly mindset that says that struggles are just awful. Pain is just pain. Bad things are just bad. But a heavenly mindset says, maybe those bad things are teaching you some things you need. Maybe those struggles are actually making you a person of God. Maybe those hardships are creating God's heart within you for other people in those struggles. Your struggles can be useful if you see them through the right lens, if you think about them the right way. One last thing, I want you to think about this, that even if we can get a heavenly mindset going, if we can set our hearts and minds on things above and think heavenly instead of just earthly, then even death itself isn't the worst thing. Right? Even death itself isn't the worst thing. The Apostle Paul said, if I get to stay here and live, I get to serve God. And if somebody kills me for serving him, then I get to go home and be with God. Either way, I win. That's a heavenly mindset. We're not just holding on to this as hard as we can because we don't know what's coming. We're looking forward to something else. Our minds are set on something else as well. In the Psalms, this is reflected. Even back in the Old Testament, this was their mindset, right? This is Psalm 103, verses 15 through 18, and it says, "As for man, his days are like grass. He flourishes like a flower of the field. The wind blows over it, and it's gone, and its place remembers it no more." Pretty encouraging, eh? Your life is like grass that grows up for a little while and is gone. I heard somebody say the other day that if you're really lucky, if you're really lucky, a few people will be remembered. Most people in the world will not be remembered by the third generation that comes down the line. Do you understand that? We think our lives are so important, but your kids will remember your life and your story. Your grandkids will remember a little bit about it. My grandkids' kids will never even think about me. They won't know a thing. I might be a picture on a computer screen, but they won't know me at all. I'll be gone. My life is short. And so that's the reminder that you're not really making a big impact if you're just measuring by earthly things. You're just here for a while and poof, you're like a vapor, you're gone. And most people won't remember you afterwards. It won't take long till people just forget you were even here. But this passage goes on and says, "But from everlasting to everlasting, the Lord's love is with those who fear him, and his righteousness with their children's children, and those who keep his covenant and remember to obey his precepts." He says, actually, from an earthly point of view, you live and die and gone, nobody remembers you. But from a spiritual point of view, you pass things on. From a spiritual point of view, God blesses you. From a spiritual point of view, you carry on. Set your minds on things above, not just on heavenly things. That is a significant shift that needs to be part of who we are and part of what we become. The point is this, that when our hearts and minds are in the right place, we see things better. We live holy lives because we see the things we deal with in spiritual ways, in holy ways. And that is the entire point. When we change our thinking, that changes our heart and that changes our life. So you're sitting there and you've listened to this whole thing so far and you say, well, yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying, that if you change your thinking and think spiritually first, it changes your earthly experience. Well, so what? That's what you're probably thinking now. So what? Does this really work? What difference does this make? It's a lot of talk for nothing. Let me tell you that this is the only reason I'm doing what I do. This mind shift is the only thing that made me want to work in a church. I'm the least churchy guy you know in lots of ways. I grew up, I didn't go to Bible camps. I didn't go to youth rallies. I didn't go to youth groups. I didn't go to Christian high schools. Not that there's anything wrong with any of that, but I just didn't do it. I didn't do any of that stuff. I didn't know anybody when I first went to Bible college. I was completely outside of all of that stuff. But I was living a life where things were kind of hard at home. There were lots of things going on. Many of you have heard those stories before. If you don't know what that means, come talk to me. I'll tell you privately. But here's the thing. I needed some hope. I needed a different way to see my life. I needed a different way to see the world. And the church I was going to said, if you can think like Jesus, you can see this differently. If you can think that there's a God who loves you and cares for you, you can see all the stuff you're going through in a better way. And it really did help. It really did help. I needed that hope to get through this. And so when I got through this, or at least partial way through this, I said, this is so important. I need to do this so I can give this to others. That's the only reason I'm here, is because I think this mind shift is that important. You need to think spiritually, and then you will live earthly well. That's what Paul is saying. And I know it's true because I've seen it. I know it's true because it works for me. It changes everything. One last story. I'll let you go. Back in 2012, a couple named John and Frances Canning were set to marry in the English town of Manchester. They were getting married in Manchester Town Hall, and they'd heard on the news that the Queen was coming to Manchester that day, and surprisingly, she's going to be at Manchester Hall on the day of our wedding. And so just as a joke, John and Frances Canning decided, we're going to invite the Queen to our wedding. And so they write to Buckingham Palace. They sent them an invitation. Buckingham Palace receives it. And to their surprise, they actually got a response that said, the Queen is really happy that you invited her to your wedding, but she's a very busy lady and cannot appear at your wedding. Thank you very much. Have a lovely life. They were just surprised even to get a rejection notice, right? They didn't even think that they'd get that. So they go to their wedding, and they're having their nice, beautiful wedding, and there's a bit of a kerfluffle in the back, and all of a sudden, the Queen shows up. She actually showed up. She came in, shook their hands, had a little chat with them. Prince Philip came along too. They stood around, had pictures with them. It was the most unexpected thing that could have happened. They were flummoxed because not only didn't they believe they'd even get a response, they'd been told she's too busy, she can't come. Oh, wait a minute, she showed up. Unexpectedly, she just dropped in and saw them and met them. I like that story because it says something about just doing things differently. Invite the Queen, think differently, try something. Think about who knows what might happen. That is a spiritual way of thinking. Who knows what might happen? Who knows who might show up? Who knows what might drop into your life? Who knows if you start thinking differently? Who knows that if you would be ready for someone to come? The Apostle Paul says over and over again, set your minds on things above. Set your hearts on things above. Jesus once said, what good would it do you to gain the whole world but lose your soul? What good would it do you not to think spiritually? Brothers and sisters, simple thing to talk about, but a huge change. Can we start every day by saying, I'm going to set my mind on spiritual things. I'm going to see things spiritually. I'm going to see each other spiritually. I'm going to think heavenly first. If you do that, it'll make the earthly make sense. That one shift is critical, but that one shift will bless every other part of your life. Set your minds, set your hearts on things above.